Have you ever thought about how one person could be two completely different people? I'm not talking about a spy or some con artist, but just an ordinary man living this life of, well, profound contradictions. Let's get into this, because the story of a man named Umar, it reveals a really fascinating and maybe even universal truth about who we all are. So let's meet Umar. Back in 2010, he's the executive director of an NGO in Jalalabad, Afghanistan, one that's funded by foreigners. He speaks fantastic English, he has this really playful, respectful relationship with his female colleagues, and he just seems, progressive. The kind of guy you'd think you'd meet in some big international city, not a conservative part of Afghanistan. And right there, that's the puzzle. Because that same progressive NGO director, just a few years earlier, he was a deeply committed member of the Taliban, a man who was literally ready to blow himself up for a cause that is the complete opposite of the world he now lives in. I mean, how is that even possible? To really get this, we have to try and hold these two totally different versions of Umar in our heads at the same time. And look, this wasn't just some act he was putting on. In his professional life, Umar really embodied this role of a modern Afghan man. He's managing international money, he's encouraging his female employees, and he's projecting this image of someone who's totally comfortable, bridging the gap between Pashtun tradition and the Western world. But get this, he also kept proof of his other life. Old pictures of himself as a young Talib, the whole 9 yards. Black turban, long beard, a Kalashnikov rifle slung right over his shoulder. When you look at that photo, it is so hard to believe it's the same person. So who was that other guy? And how did he come to be? To understand the militant, we've got to go back, way back to his youth, to the very start of his first big transformation. You have to understand, Umar grew up completely surrounded by war. His city, Jalalabad, was a battlefield. So when the public school system completely fell apart, he did what a lot of other kids did. He enrolled in a religious school, a madrasa. And it turns out he was brilliant at it. That success put him on a whole new path. And when the Taliban came to power, he jumped in with both feet. Now, Umar's motivation wasn't just about faith. It was about something we can all probably relate to: accomplishment and status. In this totally chaotic world where nothing was certain, being great at religious studies made him feel important. He got praise, he got respect, and he got a powerful sense of who he was. He felt, and these are his words, proud and happy. This quote right here, it just shows you how deep his conviction went. He wasn't some passive follower. Oh no, he was a true believer, and he got to a point of intense hatred for the outside world. To him, foreigners were just infidels, period. There was no gray area. But then, in late 2001, the world that had given him all this meaning, all this status, it just vanished. The US-backed offensive begins, and the Taliban regime, which had seemed so permanent, so solid, just collapsed with shocking speed. For Umar, this wasn't just some political shift, it was the total implosion of his entire reality. Right before the collapse, you have to understand, Umar was at the absolute peak of his radicalism. He was on the border with Pakistan, totally prepared to die as a martyr. He truly believed that was the only meaning his life had. And then, nothing. Poof. The system was gone. He was totally alone. So what does he do? In one of the most unbelievable pivots you'll ever hear, he walks into a hotel full of the very foreigners he was ready to kill, and, as he put it, for practical reasons, he gets a job as a translator. Just a stunning move, born from pure survival. But switching gears like that, it's not as simple as just changing your clothes. It meant he had to rebuild his entire sense of self, right from the ground up. The collapse of his world sent him into a deep depression. I mean, he was completely lost, ideologically, emotionally. The whole meaning of his life had just evaporated. But survival is a powerful thing, right? He knew he just had to keep going. This is where we get this incredible concept of shifting selves. The idea is that we all create these different versions of ourselves that we can kind of activate or put on a shelf depending on what life is throwing at us. It's something we all do, really. The you at work is different from the you with your family, right? Omar's case is just a much, much more extreme version of this psychological survival tool. So how did Umar do it? Well, to survive, he unconsciously stored away his militant Talib self.
Then he reactivated an earlier version of himself, that smart, intellectual student. And through his new job and all his interactions with foreigners, he started to build a brand new composite self, the progressive NGO director.
But here's the twist. That old self, it wasn't erased. It was just stored away, and it continued to exist, creating this really fascinating and conflicted inner world for him. I mean, just look at this comparison. Professionally, he was this progressive guy. He even had friendly phone chats with female colleagues, which is highly unusual there. But then in his private life, he was deeply, deeply traditional. He accepted an arranged marriage he didn't want, and he held this super strict belief that a man's honor is all about controlling his wife, so much so that his own best friend had never even seen her face. Okay, that seems like a massive contradiction, right? How can an open-minded man enforce such strict traditional rules at home? Well, the answer might be in what anthropologists call a culturally constituted defense mechanism. It sounds complicated, but the idea is that it's a set of social rules that helps a whole culture deal with difficult feelings that come from their own traditions, like arranged marriage. And for Umar, it helps him manage a deep personal conflict. Okay, let's just break down the logic here. Step 1. Umar is forced into a marriage he doesn't want. Step 2. He secretly wishes he had a more educated, compatible partner. 3. Unconsciously, he projects that same longing onto his wife. 4. This creates this terrifying fear that she might act on those desires, which would bring massive shame on his family. And the result, step 5, he enforces extreme control over her life as a defense against his own projected fears. So which one is the real Umar, the progressive director or the traditional husband? The answer, it turns out, is both. When you get down to it, Umar isn't really a hypocrite. He's a master of adaptation. His story is this powerful, if extreme, example of a process we all go through, crafting and recrafting who we are just to navigate the different demands of our lives. He's a product of globalization, war, and tradition, all colliding inside one person. Umar's life is extraordinary for sure, but it kind of forces us to look in the mirror. Just think about it for a second. There's your work self, your family self, the self you are with your oldest friends. His story really makes you ask the question, how many different selves are you storing and activating and building just to make your way through the world?